Over the past 2 centuries, Australia has lost more mammal species than any other continent. Several species are at risk of becoming extinct. Since 2016, more than 200 animal and plant species have been added to the threatened list, including the koala, the gangang cockatoo, and the Watson's tree frog. The Great Barrier Reef suffered unprecedented marine heat waves in 2016, 2017, and 2020. Ocean acidification will see parts of the reef soon reach a tipping point. The devastation wreaked by the Black Summer fires is still being felt. It's estimated that 1 to 3 billion animals were killed or displaced. The fires tipped clouds of sediment and ash into our waterways, harming already threatened species, reptiles, mammals, birds and frogs that needed urgent management intervention after the fires. Land clearing continues at pace, mostly driven by agriculture. 7.7 million hectares of habitat for threatened species was cleared or substantially degraded between 2000 and 2017. Few would dispute these are shocking figures, but is there the political will to reverse course? Bob Brown has been one of the dominant figures in the Australian conservation movement since the early 70s, and he was leader of the Australian Greens. Bob Brown, welcome to the programme.
Thanks, Sarah.
Now, 50 years after you got involved in the conservation movement, how do you respond to today's report with its story of accelerating loss of Australia's flora and fauna?
Well, it's as predicted. What is more alarming even than that loss is that we're putting our foot on the accelerator of the very causes of that loss in terms of more destruction of fisheries, more loss of forests, more warming of the atmosphere, more burning of coal.
New Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek described today's report as a shocking document. Can you trust the new Labor government to make the decisions necessary to reverse the impacts described in the report?
Well, Sarah, I'm very pleased that Tanya Plibersek, who I know from my own years in the federal parliament, is a powerful and clear-minded and intelligent operator. And she's read this report and seen what a parlous state the nation's in and the whole planet is in, and it threatens the very survival of our human species. And we must act on that, and if there's a member of the Labor government who's best placed to do that, I think it's Tanya Plibersek.
When asked about preventing new coal and gas projects at her address today, the Minister said mining will continue to be an important part of Australia's prosperity. So should the Greens support the Labor government's 43% emissions target without securing commitments on new coal and gas projects?
No, one of the things that was notable about Minister Plibersek's speech to the press club is that she didn't mention coal, and she didn't mention gas, and she didn't mention the logging and burning of forests, these agents of environmental destruction that are warming the planet and threatening, well, we've moved into a period of catastrophe that's threatening us as human beings as well. And you can't avoid looking at that cause of our misery if you're going to take real action on it.
Well, let's go back to the question that confronts the Greens, which is should they go ahead and support the government's emissions target without securing some commitment on those coal and gas projects that you just talked about?
No, absolutely not. And nearly 2 million Australians voted for much greater action than Labor was putting forward. The Labor prescription of 43%, and certainly it doesn't involve much action. It's much like business as usual. We'll see the planet warming more than 2 degrees. And that means that the bushfire catastrophes, the drought to farmlands, the worsening cyclones of the future, the mega floods that we're seeing, and the heat waves currently killing hundreds of people in Europe are going to get much, much worse. We should be sensible about this and put an end to the pollution of our atmosphere, and that means an end to future coal mines, gas fracking and burning of forests in Australia. And the question for Tanya Plibersek and her Labor colleagues, and indeed the Prime Minister Albanese, is, for a starter, are you going to stop the destruction of forests, which is not only polluting the atmosphere, but which is a prime driver of our wonderful marsupials and birds and other creatures going to extinction? Are you going to put a stop to that like New Zealand did 20 years ago?
Well, let's
catch up as a country. Let's take some action.
That's a message directed at Tanya Plibersek and the government. But what about the Greens going into negotiations next week? The last time they voted against a Labor government's proposal on climate change in 2009. You said that you don't regret that decision. Can you envisage them doing the same thing again? That is, sitting with the opposition, with Peter Dutton and the Nationals as well, to vote down Labor's emissions target?
Yes, well, after standing firm for a good outcome in 2009, and it wasn't there, we got a brilliant outcome in 2011, which made Australia a world leader in carbon trading. But the Greens at the moment are making it very clear that they want a substantial outcome. Adam Bandt's been saying that before the election and since the election, and they have a mandate. Along with the Teal independents, this big slice of the Australian populace wants an outcome that's going to be better. Now, I know that Anthony Albanese said it's 43, my way or the highway. That's not a very good basis for getting past the climate wars, is it? When you're talking with people who've been voted by millions of Australians to get better action. But I'm sure that the Greens will get a better action in terms of reducing the pollution that's going into the atmosphere out of Australian coal mines and gas fracking operations and indeed burning forests as a part of this process. Otherwise, why would you cave in to the government on this? I mean, it does require sensible negotiation, and that's what the Greens are calling for. Let's negotiate a good outcome.
But you can envisage at the end
coming from the people of Australia's vote.
You can envisage at the end of that outcome that the Greens could make a decision not to support the government's 43% target when it comes up next week. That's
very symbolic, that 43%. It's got no teeth in it. It's not going anywhere. We all know it's far too low, but there's no mechanism attached to that legislation, as I understand it, to make that 43% even work. So is let alone the 75%, which it should be.
Forgive me for interrupting. So is that your advice to Adam Bandt right now, that he should consider voting against that number?
No, I'm not so daft as to be giving orders to Adam Bandt or Sarah Hanson-Young or any of our Green representatives.
You might be smart enough to give them advice, however, rather than orders.
I'm happy to do that, and that is get a better outcome than just a symbolic number of 43. And what the Greens are doing here is getting Labor to sever some of its ties with these massive fossil fuel corporations who export their money out of the country anyway, and a change across to renewable energy, to reducing our consumption, and to allowing us to live with this planet instead of off it. And look future generations in the eye, because they're not here to vote or to negotiate on this, but we're here to ensure that they have a world as wonderful to live in as the planet we're on now.
Bob Brown, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks very much, Sarah.